construction you can get. This is Built on Blues. Built on Blues.
Welcome back to Built on Blues, everybody. I'm your host, Graeme Bryks. Usually, real estate developers come from one of two places, finance or construction. But my guest today has a resume that looks more like a Silicon Valley founder than a Wisconsin builder. He started in architecture, then pivoted to fund his own software development company, merged that into a marketing agency, and then decided to apply all that systems thinking into brick and mortar. He is now the COO and partner at CapVest, overseeing everything from commercial builds to property management. I've got Brett Burkhart in the studio. Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Graeme. I appreciate the invitation to be here.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure. I have to start with your background because it's fascinating. You went from designing buildings to designing code, and now you're back to building physical assets. Most guys leave construction to get into tech because it's easier. You went the other way. Did that background in software development, where everything is about logic, APIs, and efficiency, make you look at the construction industry and say, wow, this is broken, I can fix this?
It definitely gave me some confidence that I think as much as I've had experience in various industries, I found some similarities and some common threads. And I think operations is kind of the right role for me because I was never an expert software developer. I think what I really found my niche through all of those things was being that translator of just really understanding the need. So kind of going back to, growing up, I just really always wanted to design homes. Frank Lloyd Wright was a huge inspiration of mine. My wife and I actually got engaged at his house in Wisconsin when we were during college, and I was going to school for architecture, and that's just what I always wanted to do. I wanted to understand how do families live, what's unique. Every family dynamic is different, what they value is different. So just asking those questions of how do you want your space to function, what works for you? And along that time during college, I was also kind of starting to learn some software development just on my own. And as I got into actually doing projects for other companies and trying to understand their end users that they were trying to serve, I kind of realized in retrospect that all the questions were kind of the same. Like, what are they trying to accomplish? What are we trying to build to suit their needs? What's natural to them? And what is the objective? And I think as I took that through the various industries that I've been in, it's still the same questions we ask today. It's, who are we trying to serve? What do they want? How do we deliver that? What amenities are they interested in? We build multifamily now, so it's not custom to them, but we also do a really good job of trying to ask our tenants in future projects, what amenities are you valuing that we should continue doing? And what are we missing that you would really appreciate having? And we use that to inform our future projects to include the things that people are looking for to make something home.
I think that's super smart that you guys take the feedback from your previous clients to put it into the future of your new coming clients. I think that's a really smart move. I've never actually heard anyone kind of take that approach before, so I think that's really interesting. I read that your primary objective at CapVest is to champion the development of organizational protocols and tools. That sounds like the polite way of saying you had to clean up the chaos. When you first joined CapVest, coming from that tech background, what was the biggest operational shock?
I think, I had some exposure to the construction side of things. I really had no experience in the property management side of things. So at CapVest, we do development, everything from identifying which communities are on the edge of the growth that meet the criteria we're looking for, that we know are going to support more multifamily. And then we purchase the land, we do all the infrastructure. And then we have the construction division. So we're general contractors for the construction phase, but we don't just build it and then sell it. Our own team, then the other half of our team has to maintain those and manage those and get those units leased, and maintenance team has to maintain them. I didn't have any experience in, tenant law and what rules and regulations you have to do around multifamily and how tenants come and go out of those spaces. I was really just initially involved in my past on the design, and then it's yours and you move on to the next project. Was something I really kind of had to learn was how do you retain tenants and what kind of things do you have to do to work with them to make sure that they're having a good experience and we deliver a good end result for our investors by maintaining those units being occupied.
Yeah, of course. CapVest is unique because you guys do it all from capital, construction, and property management, like you mentioned. For the developers listening who just write checks for and hire general contractors. Can you break down the science of keeping that all in-house? Like, does owning the construction arm actually give you better control over the end product?
Yeah, sure. There's certainly it's not the way everyone else does it. What we've kind of found to be a benefit of doing that is we typically build projects that we are holding and maintaining because we do have investors in our projects, and so we've got a prospectus and some projections on how this product is going to perform for them. And in order to have that predictable outcome, we know that everything from just the construction cost and getting it built on time and on budget is one aspect, but the other part of that is they're interested in the long term. They don't benefit until there's rental income coming in. And our
Yeah.
team having the ability to maintain that at a high level, to have control over how we market it, how we price it, how we maintain it, and keep the value of the asset up is a big advantage for us because it gives our investors even more confidence that we're not handing this off to somebody else to manage because our projections are really based on, like I said, the long-term hold of this, not just the
Yeah.
construction phase. The construction phase is one aspect of at least getting the deal started, but it's really about the long-term viability of the project. And so having that property management and the maintenance in-house allows us to maintain the value of the asset all the way through the project.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of operations and a lot of back end that you guys need to, focus on as well as, like you said, the retention of your clients and making sure that people are happy. You've got the construction team trying to finish the building and then the property management team trying to lease it. In most companies, those two teams never talk until it's too late. How are you guys bridging that gap?
Yeah, kind of in the effort of not allowing people to work in their own unique silos, we did recognize that that was an issue, and you do kind of have two halves of the company, and unless you force that collaboration, they probably won't ever naturally interact. So we recognized that and had to kind of adjust over time that initially it was the construction team is going to do the development and the building and then hey, we're done, it's yours to take and manage going forward. And we would hear then later on from the maintenance team or from leasing agents what they've heard back from tenants because they're doing the showings and trying to get things leased. What we really should have done was X. And what tenants keep asking about or pointing out or, wondering why we did it this way. And we said, well, we should have a lot more input from property management, the leasing agents that are hearing it directly from tenants that are walking through these units, and the maintenance team who's going back to have to fix certain things. What should we change on the front end to have a better outcome and make this better for them and help them feel respected in the process, right? Versus just building it and saying like, well, it's yours to deal with now. We're done. We're moving on to the next project. It's having some respect for the fact that we're handing this over to you, but you're taking on something you didn't build. And
Yeah.
we need your input and we need to know what we should do differently. Anything from materials we choose for flooring to the colors we use on, the cabinets that we choose, the paint colors, what's easier to touch up later when a tenant moves out and you have to do a unit turn. How do we ensure that insulation is done correctly, the doors are adjusted correctly? So anytime that we get to the end of a project, before we turn it over to property management side, we have them come and do a walkthrough. So we have our construction teams finish their punch list, they do their walkthrough, and in their eyes, it's good. And then we have our leasing agents and maintenance technicians come in and they do a walkthrough and they notice certain things that our construction team may not because they're looking at it through the tenant's eyes. Here's the things we always hear about. Here's the things that they're going to ask, why is it this way versus the other way? A good example, we're going through a big project we're planning out right now that we're going to be starting in the summer. And, we met with our architects last week because we typically build similar plans depending on what the location allows or what best fits that location, whether it's a
Mhm.
8 and 12 unit that's got more suburban feel and it's spread out more, or if it's a higher density, we're doing 3-story buildings that are 24 and 30 unit buildings. But we're doing a larger one coming up. And so we were going through modifications we might want to make because every time we build these, we learn something and we tweak something and try to improve that. And so we brought in the property management team to the design phase. And we said, here's what we're thinking for the layout and some changes we'd like to make. What's your input? And they said, well, tenants are going to ask, why can't we have side-by-side washer and dryers versus stacked? And we're like, well, if that's what they're asking for, that's a great input to have up front because we can totally do
Yeah.
it. It just requires a couple of adjustments. You know, tenants ask about, well, where's the entry closet versus the cubbies or something. So it's little things that we know are going to help inform rather than just keep doing what you're doing. You got to have input from people who have a different perspective. And I think
Yeah.
that's going to make for a much better product. And then when they go showing these units and talking to tenants, they've got some ownership in that too. They're like, hey, we wanted to make sure, we've listened to you, we've heard you. Here's some changes that we've made, and we're excited to show you some of these features because we know people are going to want them.
I think the tenants probably appreciate that a lot too, especially the new ones coming. If the property manager can like walk them through and be like, "Hey, like you said, we've heard these changes that other people are wanting, and I think it's a great highlight for the building that you guys or the end product that you guys have built." So it's not just like you said, repetition when it comes to just like build and then move on to the next build, move on to the next. You guys are actually taking the input and allowing everyone to kind of collaborate on your next project being better than the one before. You're a founder, you're a former founder, so I know you aren't afraid of coding. We've seen AI take over the boring parts of property management, coming from answering tenant questions, scheduling maintenance, qualifying leads. Are you building your own internal tools to handle that, or are you looking for an off-shelf AI solution to layer on top of what you guys are doing right now?
Yeah, well, you're certainly right that AI is a huge conversation, and we're looking for ways to implement that. I actually had a great conversation with a fellow software developer that I have known for a long time, and we had a good long conversation about where does it fit in business because he's also now more in an operations role. So oddly enough, we're kind of finding ourselves making almost the same migration. So we
Mhm.
had a chance to talk about how we use technology then versus how are we using it now. How do we get people to adopt things? And as with anything in business, it's about creating processes and you have standard procedures because you can ensure a predictable outcome. And the hard part right now with AI is that everyone's kind of playing with it in a very different way and finding
Mhm.
different ways to use it. So we've got to get people to see some value in creating it as part of our standard process. Some of the software that we use have integrated AI features themselves already, so we can leverage what they've already built in. And then we're identifying where are the repetitive, frustrating, low value tasks that you're doing that we need to find a way to automate. And then how do we make that a company wide standard that we're all using? So if we're looking at something like ChatGPT, my friend had a good way of explaining it to people that are not nearly as familiar with technology is thinking about all the different tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity,
Yeah.
different things like that as different brains. And even within those, you kind of create specialists and you kind of ask a specific brain what they're best at, what their opinion is. So you kind of go to the people with the answers just like you would to somebody on your team. And I think what I'm working on now is trying to create something company wide we can all leverage that has that common knowledge. So we're not all trying to build the same thing for ourselves, but have something company wide that we have a tool that's kind of a portfolio we can all reference. So we can load that with knowledge on what our lease says. So when tenants ask specifically which pets are allowed and can I do this? Can I do that? How does this work? We're not all having to go, sift through the leases and find that language, but we've got a tool that already knows our business and everybody can leverage it. So we're giving consistent answers and providing a high level of customer service.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive way to look at it and, use it. I think AI is a really important tool that everyone should be using now when it comes to simple tasks. Like you mentioned, like you don't want 100 different people looking for like the same thing when, you can build that corporate tool where like one person can just go find all the records and be like, hey, like we actually do allow pets in this leasing agreement. That is really important as well as, you mentioned each AI kind of is its own brain for certain things. I think a lot of people just go to one AI solution when it comes to ChatGPT and ask it like so many different things when, maybe Claude's better for copywriting or Gemini is better for one thing and then ChatGPT is better for this other solution. So I'm looking at it that way with how you mentioned, like, oh, I'm going to go for an expert in this field and ask them that question. And then I'm going to go to an expert in a separate field and ask them those questions. I feel like that's how people should look at AI because if you just give it such a broad parameter, it's going to give you broad answers that might not be like direct to your solution. So I think what you guys are doing is a smart move for sure. You guys are based in, your area, steady, reliable market compared to the boom bust of the coasts.
Mhm.
Looking at 2026, is the goal to double down on that region with more multifamily, or are you looking to export the CapVest model to new territories?
Our plan right now is to continue in our area. So we build within a 90-mile radius of Eau Claire, and Eau Claire, Wisconsin is an hour and a half straight east of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So we've got kind of a path in between those two. And we kind of have our company vision is to build within a 90-mile radius of Eau Claire. And that's for a few different reasons. One being we want to minimize people's time on the road. So we have project superintendents and we have leasing agents of people that are hopping from property to property for various things. And we don't necessarily want to spread people out where they spend all day just driving to and from. We also want to leverage a lot of the subcontractor relationships that we have so that we can continue to build those relationships and their teams that know our projects. And when we work with the handful of electricians that we use, they know when they look at our plans predictably how much wire, how many boxes, how many switches, how many hours it takes to do their work in our projects. And that allows us to have a very predictable outcome as far as staying on budget and on schedule to get our projects done so we can have predictable costs. And then our projections for investors are also reliable. So right now we see so much opportunity and we build in a lot of communities kind of in that 90-mile radius around Eau Claire that right now we don't really have a plan of expanding outside of that. Not saying we wouldn't, but right now it's working well enough for us and we see enough opportunity on the horizon that we don't really have the need to expand too much further.
Fair enough. This is my favorite question to ask everyone I bring onto the show. You know the systems, but if you had a magic wand and could execute, or sorry, get rid of one code update to the construction industry right now, whether it's erasing the permit backlog, automating subcontractor payments, or fixing the supply chain, what would it be?
I think it would be with like municipal approvals. That is the
Yeah.
one that like, you can control certain parts of the process and some of that stuff is outside of your control. And some communities are smaller than others and they haven't had a lot built in a while. So you have people that have been on their boards and on their councils for a while that just haven't seen a lot of the stuff that we're bringing in. And you feel like you have to kind of go through the education phase, specifically if you have a TID, a tax increment district, and that requires either forming it or expanding it in some form. It just requires so many layers of approvals to get through that it just kind of drags out the time. So we have a company vision of being a visionary real estate company. And if you take a visionary out of there, it's pretty boring. A real estate company. No one's excited about that. So we had to kind of define what does that mean to be a visionary real estate company? And that comes at, by looking at unique factors that might make a project viable where others may not see that opportunity. So whether that's looking at communities and we have a matrix we kind of run through that meets certain criteria to help us recognize when a community is either a good fit or maybe a good fit in a few years. And then we start those relationships with municipalities and landowners and things like that so that when the time is right, they know of us, that we have a relationship built and we can get things going quickly. And they're familiar with our projects. So we try to look out a number of years in the future and kind of roadmap. Hey, here's where we think opportunities are about to arise. Let's start having
Mhm.
those conversations now so we can try to shorten the process as much as possible by bringing some familiarity in. And we also have a lot of letters of recommendation from other communities. So whatever we can do there. But sometimes the bottleneck is just the governmental process. And I think anytime that you get the USDA involved, at least from in the US, that's subject to delays that you can't control. A government
Yeah.
shutdown, and all of a sudden they're not working for a while. Then they come back to work and they got a backlog. So I think finding some way to standardize some of the municipal approvals would be a huge bonus.
Yeah, maybe AI can fix with that one day. So they don't have to deal with the government.
Should be a set of criteria, right? If it meets the criteria and it's viable and you've got a proven track record, but sometimes it's so much of it comes down to building relationships and it's such a
Yeah.
subjective thing of whether or not the people on the city council want this. If they, sometimes they've had a bad experience with somebody else and that has nothing to do with you, but you're impacted by it because now you really got to, go above
Becomes
and beyond.
biased sometimes.
Yep. So it just takes relationship building and there's just no way to rush that.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Last one here before time ends. For the technical founder listening right now, maybe a coder or an engineer who wants to get into real estate development, what is one thing they need to unlearn from the tech world to survive in the construction world?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, you know, think I'm probably not unique in this, but when I was doing software development, I could just pull all-nighters and I could just crunch things out. If I had a deadline to get done, I knew I could get after it. I could grab somebody else that I know with a unique skill set and we could kind of pound this thing out together and get it done. And I think what I had to learn in real estate, kind of going back to our last question, is there are so many parties at play that it takes such planning. You have to learn to develop the relationships. You have to learn to sell in a way, because you got a convincing of the value that you're bringing. A lot of times you're asking for something. You're asking for some sort of tax incentive approval or a certain stipulation that you want to, be able to get through that may not be the standard. So I think you've really got to learn how to plan ahead. You've got to learn how to build that network of people around you in the various trades and industries with relationships that are going to help you get your project done, because there is nothing about real estate that is solo. Unless you're simply buying and selling homes, and even that I would say is not entirely solo, but when you're
Yeah.
trying to go through development, you've got civil engineers, you've got architects, you've got subcontractors, you've got so many parties there that the emphasis on organization and process, you have to have a seamless process there and a really good chain of communication to keep things moving, because it's really hard to overcome a bad reputation when you start a project that doesn't go well and you want to then build another one or go into a different community and they want to see references. I mean, you just really have to have a network of subs you can rely on, and you got to have a network of people that are willing to vouch for you. And that just takes a lot of proactive communication and not trying to be the hero who saves it at the last day, because you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really inspiring and insightful stuff. I really appreciate you saying that. A lot of the guests I have on this show who are super successful, it seems like a common goal is having that line of communication always open and honest. And,
Mhm.
having that customer relationship is super important, as well as just networking in general in 2026 right now with AI. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of staying in more and like a little bit more shy, it seems like. I think it's important for people to hear that, like, not in order to get ahead, but it certainly helps to get ahead by talking to people and, asking for help or, just building relationships and like you said, selling, like knowing how to almost sell yourself sometimes because that's going to be really important to whatever industry that you decide to get into. So, it's really insightful that you say all that. So thank you for that, Brett. I really appreciate it. For anyone looking to invest with CapVest or rent one of your guys' properties, where should they look?
Yeah, you can go to capvestpartner.com, and that's where you can find information on us. And you can sign up to be included in our investor portal to hear about deals that we have coming up. You could reach out through our contact form. We'd be happy to answer questions. You have all of our properties. If you're looking to rent something or you want to see examples of projects that we've built and where they're located, what they look like for quality and size and location, it's all of that's on our website.
Awesome. We'll link those up in the show notes. And just want to say one last time, thank you again so much, Brett, for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was really insightful. So thank you again.
I appreciate the invitation. Thanks for the conversation today.
Yeah, it was great. And to everyone else listening, you know the drill. Keep building, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye now. Perfect.